International Studies Malaysia, Associate Professor Dr. Daniel Yusuf from IIUM, the moderator of our forum today, distinguished NGO representative, participants, members of the organizing committee, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning. I am Dr. Nurai Norman. On behalf of International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, IIUM, welcome you all to the special morning of splendor. We are glad to have you here with us on this auspicious forum for today entitled Effective Role of CSO in Nation Building 2.0 Fringe Players or Partners. For your information, ISTAC-IIUM is honored to have Axin and Ikram Malaysia to be our co-organizers for our program today. Before we roll on with this welcoming speech, I would like to request Ustaz Muhammad Nazreen Abdul Rahman, Religious Officer of ISTAC-IIUM, for the recitation of dua. Please welcome.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا شاكرين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا ولوالدينا وارحمهم كما ربونا صغارا اللهم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك وطاعتك اللهم إنا نسألك من الخير كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم ونعوذ بك من الشر كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك عبدك ونبيك ونعوذ بك من شر ما عاذ به عبدك ونبيك اللهم إنا نسألك الجنة وما قرب إليها من قول أو عمل ونعوذ بك من النار وما قرب إليها من قول أو عمل ونسألك أن تجعل كل قضاء قضيته لنا خيرا. O Allah, we ask you of all good of what we have done and what we have not done in this world and in the hereafter. We seek refuge in you from the evil of what we have done and what we have not done in this world and in the hereafter. O Allah, we ask of you all good that your servant and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to ask of you. We seek refuge in you from all evil that your servant and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to seek refuge in you from. O Allah, we ask you for paradise and what brings us nearer to it of deeds and sayings. We seek refuge in you from hellfire and what brings us near to it of deeds and sayings. We ask you for the good consequences of your decree. اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان وفي كل زمان اللهم انصر عبادك الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. O Allah, please protect and save all our brothers and sisters who are tested by you in Turkey and Syria and in all around the world. For you, the most knowing all of good in this world and in the hereafter. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل اللهم فينا ولا معنا شقيا ولا مطرودا ولا محروما ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا عليك توكلنا وإليك أنبنا وإليك المصير اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من جهد البلاء ودرك الشقاء وسوء القضاء وشماتة الأعداء ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين. Thank you.
Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Thank you, Ustaz Nazreen. Ladies and gentlemen, civil society organizations, as we know, are essentially the so-called intermediary institutions that create a bridge between the state and the people. A healthy relationship between the organizations and the government is very much determined by sharing common objectives. Therefore, we are here today gathered as a conscious society to discuss and bring forward suggestions and action plans for the nation building of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to welcome the co-organizing chairman of this forum, who is also the CEO of the Allied Coordinating Council of Islamic NGOs, ACSIN, Tuan Haji IR Muhammad Jamaluddin Shamsuddin, to deliver his welcoming speech. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. I was the radio from yes, the here. This is your place now. This things are over the job has but they have by the ones. Outside. Professor Dr. Rajis Next. Scientist. One city quantita. Dari kono saja. Semua bahasa dari yang tahu your certificates. Since the president of the I understand. Very thankful. Platform. Professor Assist as Ben right now. But thank you for your time and support. On behalf of the organizing partners, I'd like to coordinate council of Islamic NGOs, ACSIN, ISTAC-IIUM, kindly welcome over to this seminar. Title is question mark. Question mark is hope to answer by the end of the session. Our special thanks from Aziz Dr. Aziz Patel, National Supervisor, Dr. Daniel for making this roundtable discussion seminar a success together with our vaccine. The seminar is also streamed live in IIUM YouTube, several Facebook live accounts of vaccine examples. Our thanks to for the support of Sumbangan Group this year as a collaborating partner. Our distinguished panelists will be sharing their insights and wisdom with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, the objective of today's seminar is to make an attempt to assess the role of CSOs collectively in nation building. I'm going to use the word CSO and NGOs interchangeably, but basically they are the driving force that represents civil society. And the question is, are CSOs important to nation building? If yes, are they accepted as partners or just seen as fringe players, only to be called when needed? Are they given enough resources and finance to be able to plan the activities, have a basic place of operation, full-time staff, and to be able to implement their annual plans? I have developed a simple I've developed a simple 7-point litmus test to evaluate if the hypothesis is true or not, and whether we are players or partners. So there's a simple 7-point litmus test, and these 7 points will be analyzed by the participant group and maybe the panelists during the seminar. So I'm not going to go through the 7 points, but it will be surfacing during seminar. My hunch to that question, I think that on this, I have my own hunch, having been a full-time CSO activist for past 18 years, that most CSOs have a shoestring budget to work on. To make things worse, the fund is not consistent, and sometimes it is. Sometimes there is some, and sometimes there is not. So we need to really work very hard to get the funds to fund our operations, basic operations. For Muslim-based CSOs, they are not allowed to collect tithes or zakat from feds. For example, in Malaysia, where you have 6 CSOs, Muhammadiyah, Sahadat Ulama, and so on, that are operating on zakat funds that they are allowed to collect, and of course sadaqahs. There are, however, some exceptions of reasonably well-funded CSOs that have a big membership pool to draw from. And government-based organizations coordinating CSOs, however, are well-funded and are given big annual budgets. Yeah. For example, Yadim has a very big budget and it's consistent. And I think that is where a significant disparity in terms of the haves and have-nots among the CSO players. Local NGOs, by the way, that are riding on the Western, I don't know whether this is sensitive or not, Sharul, may not be sensitive. No. Local NGOs riding on the Western-based liberal narratives are comparatively well-funded. At least cited by Malaysia Now on the 4th of February recently, there was a report shows a total of 9 entities, including lesser-known NGOs, involved in campaigning for gender and sexual rights, are beneficiaries of a total of 20.7 million ringgit for a 3-year period. Yeah. And those who are good at math, maybe you can just divide. There is 9 entities, 20.7 million ringgit for 3 years. And this fund is part of a massive 366 billion allocation to promote global Europe, the European Union's multilateral agenda around the world. And the recipients of local NGOs and organizations include Sisters in Islam, which is registered as SIS Suluan Berhad under the Companies Act, and Kyrys Network, Kyrys Network, KRYSS, which were awarded 3.5 million over 3 years. So if anyone is going to have this right, this 1.6 is packed by 2 and divided by 3 years. And this is not just one source. There are also similar foreign foundations with their own alien objectives and narratives they want to promote, such as the National Endowment for Democracy, the British Embassy, Press, Open Society Foundation, Soros Foundation, and Konrad Adenauer Foundation. These are ones that actually contribute a lot of funds to certain civil society organizations. And no wonder that these foreign-funded, local-based NGOs are extremely well-funded compared to local CSOs. Ladies and gentlemen, a resolution to this question today on the role of CSOs is more important as the nation moves to a developed status. The third cause is, i.e., the civil society plays an important role in society and nation building by channeling the voice of the people and their aspirations without political interference and influence. The centralization of power in the hands of executives or political elites without proper check and balance and enforcement may bring stress, people, and subsequently hardship. And as Professor Aziz mentioned just now, I mean, we are playing a significant role in experiential learning on the ground. And that is, I think, a significant contribution of CSOs to the nation's wealth. The third force is required to balance potential centralization of power and checks and balance that are played also by other forces, the opposition, the media, and enforcement agencies. And educating the people on the rights and roles of the third force is needed for fostering democracy. The government also needs to collaborate with the third force in state and nation building by incorporating their views, in formulating policies and addressing contemporary societal issues, which may be marginalized or overlooked by the government. In developed nations, the government directly assists recognized CSOs in various areas and fields by offering matching grants up to a ratio of 3 to 1 for every dollar raised by CSO. There are also situations where excess funds in government ministries channeled to CSOs working in emergency situations such as flood relief, fire, natural disaster, and specific well-defined work scopes. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's my humble view that the time has come for civil society organizations to recognize as partners in nation building, not jumping guns, but this is my view. And given enough resources and finances to move effectively and effectively. So I would dream that there will come a day when the Minister of Finance tables his budget for the financial year, will be willing to allocate a sum for CSOs using the mechanism of matching grants. When that day comes, I'm sure CSO activists will give thanks and breathe a sigh of relief that their burden of fundraising is relieved from them to concentrate on their work, whichever area is needed. Thank you again for your kind attendance, and a big thank you for the committee that has worked so hard to make this event a memorable one. Our apologies for any shortcomings. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Honorable Tuan Haji IR Muhammad Jamaluddin, for your wonderful speech. He has enlightened the main role of CSOs in voicing out the heart of the people as well as being partners in nation building. Now the time has come to call upon our honorable keynote speaker for today, Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Birgaud, who have been instrumental to ISTAC's successful journey till today. He is a man who needs no introduction, but I will mention a few of his outstanding achievements today. He is included in the 2000 Outstanding Intellectuals of the 21st Century by the International Biographical Center Cambridge in 2005, received the Ajman Award for Quality and Excellence by the Ruler of Ajman in 2011, Award of the Best Scholar and Contributor to the Development of the Islamic World by OIC Today Malaysia in 2019, and in the recent years received the Exemplary Murabbi Award, Qudwa Award, and the Global Relevance and Citizenship Award given by IIUM in 2011 and 2022. A big applause, everyone. He is a great author of 11 books, over 70 scholarly articles in index and referee journals, and over 100 international and local conference papers covering Islamic worldview, civilizational renewal, prophetic method of da'wah, culture and education, strategic planning, etc., etc. I will cite a few examples. The book entitled The Islamic Worldview and Tajdeed, a Civilizational Approach, and the article entitled An Islamic Model of Civilizational Development and Sustainability, Maqasidic Approach. He has the knack to do many things. He was the former Deputy of Director of Internationalization and Global Network, IIUM, Between the years of 2011 till 2018, the former Sheikh of ISTAC, the member board of the directors of the Center of Higher Education and Scientific Research Ethics, ISESCO, and the advisor to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation on Cultural, Social, and Family Matters. Now we are honored to have him as our Dean in ISTAC-IIUM and today as our keynote speaker. Without further ado, please help me to welcome Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Bergaud to deliver his keynote speech.
Attention to Dean for organizing Chairman and CEO at SEAM. Our honorable panelists for this forum today, one Haji Tadish Hasham, President for Ikram, Malaysia, Madam Siti Fadila, Deputy CEO of Islamic Relief Malaysia, Dr. Sharifa or Shahida Sayyid Anwar, University of Malaysia, UTM, Mr. Idin Ko, Senior Fellow, Institute of Strategic and International Studies by CIS Malaysia, Associate Professor Dr. Daniel, our former Deputy Dean, our beloved lecturer is IUM, and the moderator for our today's forum. Distinguished NGOs, NGO representatives, participants, members of the organizing committee, ladies and gentlemen, and not to forget our colleagues, teachers, and students who are with us here. Once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. It's a very great honor to have Brother Jamaluddin and his team here, all these CSOs leading in Malaysia here and in other places. I think is not only timely, but it's vital and crucial for the development of the roles and functions of the NGOs in nation building. That's what is crucial and important. Because I think that though the issue of money, resources is important, but actually what is much, much more important is the will for nation building, or to do nation. Because when there is a will, then there is a way. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as the leader of the Ummah, when he started his mission of building nations, not only nations, but build a civilization with many nations, many cultures, many civilizations, many people, he was not possessing at his hand the weapons or the means or the money which Byzantium and the Roman empires were having at that time. But because he has the will and the vision, and he has the motivation, and he has the sense of responsibility and mission, you see what Prophet Muhammad did, and what Islamic civilization did in more than 1,000 years. So, brothers and sisters, what we are doing today here is a great responsibility, is a great mission, not only for NGOs or CSOs, for every Muslim living in these countries and in the Ummah and in the world. It's as long as you are Khalifa on earth, you are vicegerent on earth, there is a responsibility upon you not only to do nation building, but also to do, as Mr. Khaldun says, ta'amir, populating the world. In Bahasa, we say tamadud, build tamadud. Our work is not only to do the activities and we have this orphan, we do this we do this, but connecting all the dots, we are doing tamadud. We are building the civilization. And our drivers Here is the nation building. But what is beyond nation building is creating what the Quran says, hayat, a desirable life. The aim is to build hayatul tayyibah. And from an Islamic perspective, as Brother Jamaluddin was saying very beautifully when he talked about the liberal narrative. I'm talking now for the Islamic narrative on what we call the role of CSOs in nations. The role starts from each and every one of us as individuals, as Khalifa on earth, before being NGOs or organizations for civil society or for science or for technology or for whatever. What is important is you as a human, as an individual, as Khalifa on Allah, Khalifa on earth. What do you do to accomplish the mission and message of Islam? You are Khalifa of Allah. You are supposed to do at least 4 things. Number 1, you worship God. Number 2, you populate the world. You do i'mar. You do ta'mir. You do ma'mur. You do tamadud. The 2. Number 3, you do what the Quran says, ta'aruf. Ta'aruf. We have created you from a single pair of male and female and made you into nations and tribes. You may know one another. The most honored of you in the sight of God is the pious, is the one who does good things. CSO does good things. But our CSO is based on the criteria of taqwa, criteria of dignity, criteria of respect, criteria of loving humanity, tolerating humanity, serving humanity, caring about humanity. So here were the germs and seeds of serving and caring comes. So brothers and sisters, as a Muslim, as a Muslim, we need to have our own narrative because the narrative is very important. What we teach to our children in school to become the CSOs of the future, not because of this policy or that policy, not because he is a Khalifa on earth. By virtue, you are Khalifa on earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. You are the best ummah evolved to humanity. Why? Not because you are amassing wealth, not because you become an empire and colonize others, not because you are material. No, because you are enjoying good and spreading khair and doing truth, and you are a good believer. And that's actually the core of what we call CSO, is when you have that understanding that you have a wajib, a responsibility, a mas'uliyah to serve your society. It's not a luxury. It's not something that you do. You do just, oh yeah, okay, when I have some time, I do it. No, it is wajib. God will ask you hereafter, where do you use your life, your money, your energy? Is it for yourself? Okay. Is it for others? Is it for your ummah? Is it for humanity and world? So as a Muslim, NGOs, and so we have great responsibilities and great wajib, not whether we want or we don't want. We learn from ourselves, from the ummah, that if we don't do this, the ummah will fall. So these are the wajib, the responsibilities that each and every one of us must do. So I come back as Khalifa on earth. You have to worship God. You have to feed and do the and create desirable life. Number three, you have to do the civilizational and cultural dialogue. No others are such as civilizations. We are living in a multi-racial and religious society where there is wisdom and culture from Muslim places and Chinese and Indian concepts. How do we capitalize on to build the ummah, the nations of the essence? That's what Islam was. Oh, we are Muslim NGOs, Muslims, but our wajibs, our responsibilities is beyond this. Not only in Turkey and Syria, but in any place in this world where a human being needs you, you need to do and to help if you can. So, brothers and sisters, what you are doing there, what activity all these CSOs are doing is something great, and we must support them. That's why when Prophet Jamaluddin came and said, we want to collaborate with ISTAC, want the support of ISTAC, I think, that's my responsibility. Anything that we can do and the ISTAC, please trust us, please go ahead. That's why we start faster the figures. Not only the CSOs and NGOs, but scholars, students, teachers, professors. So all this is our responsibility. In fact, as a professor, how to help in this? I can teach assistants in each class that your wages, your responsibilities, care about to help us. Come as a bond of when helping one another. So once I picture this narrative, what we are doing today, especially in the context of community, which is that is the and what is right. Bringing this idea and framework and approach and model of what we call ethics, besides Malaysia methods, is actually bringing another narrative on how this country's cycle. And we can capitalize on this, especially this effort, really to do more, and I am sure that we would get it. Just to package, articulate our proposals, our initiatives with government entities, both can help us. Now, let's delve a little bit on this Madani's framework to be our news interest or motivator or driver to do more. If you read this Madani, I read the booklet 184 pages on spirit. Spirit stands for 6 important things. These 6 important things are in the core of Islam. S stands for sustainability. Istidam. Sustainability. Islamic sustainability, as mentioned here, is not just based on material gains. It's not just based on exploiting, destroying the resources. No, the opposite is the balance, which can find that's delivered. Vice chairs and grips, keys, and care and company. Care and company. وما أرسلنا رحمة للعالمين. We reflect our رحمة للعالمين concept and sculptures. Our relations between governments, with people and people, between Muslim and non-Muslim. Can we show that's the science, that's the narratives? Yes. Ours, respect each other. You don't respect if you respect students, people respect government. That's the narrative. And when the concept of respect becomes a culture, becomes part and parcel of the characters, of our children, of our lawyers, and the XO of us, you will see a difference. Different relation, different way of looking at things. At that time, we will not talk about finances because the money will cost. Because our hearts already changed. Our minds changed. Our perception changed. We are here, Al Khalifa. The more you help, the more you serve, the more you get happiness. Now, the more you give, you people are managing. I have 10,000. How come I give Sadaqah 8,000? Of sign from Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah and all these great people. And Abu Bakr Siddiq before him, where you saw that. But they before specific. So first it says, we are talking about care and compassion. These actually are talking to this quality or this Madani framework which becomes driving process. For the new type of human capital needs to be created. New types of support needs to be fields based on care and compassion, based on balanced sustainability, based on, and then it's innovations. Innovations. We need to be innovators. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba in the battle of Khandaq, or in the battle of in Hadithinda, or in Yarmouk, how do they win over 25,000 people, win over 200? It's innovation, it's creativity, and we have a human mind. We can be creative, we can find money. Money is not an issue. It is the dream, it is the mission, it is the vision, it is the motivation, it is the responsibility. What do I have? What do I want to do? Rasul says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, yeah, one Quraysh, it says, measures of dunya, it is existence. Right hand and the both of my left hand says it is just after this stage is four. If anything happens or no money for this, that's my job is there. It's to do this. It's to feel this. It's to feel. And our children in schools have tools. Great. We must possess that. That's what the is. And so innovation that comes P for script, P for prosperity. All of us looking for prosperity. And in this narrative of Madani, yes, prosperity is not only money. It is tranquility, it's love, it's healthy, it's serving, it's caring. If we are having all these values, I tell you the little money that we have, we can do wonders. Worse, there are many nations very wealthy, but because they don't have that thinking, that sense, they don't have this money. So, and the last one is for trust. We need to trust the institutions. We need to trust the people. We need to trust what we do is others. So within these 6 drivers, we can talk about a new narrative of the culture of CSOs, how the mind, how the character, how the skills of the coming and the future CSOs should be in this system. And when we talk about Malaysia here, Malaysia is actually a case studies. I can say it's a leading case studies in this period of CSOs and NGOs helping in nation building compared to many other countries. So we should always look, even though when you, Brother Jamal was telling about the shortcomings, about this, what we need, yeah, that's our reality here. But our ambitions is to reach this. And if we have this in mind, the time will come and we reach it. But if we don't have it and we are just thinking anything and it's really right. So nation building is something great. The last thing I wanted to tell you in this narrative, is according to this model of building nations, we are living in the very business. You know, the documentary, one concept is called post-farming. Post-farming. since COVID-19, even before COVID-19, the whole world is living in a very complicated situation. So post-normal means we are not living like normal like before. In fact, issues, global warming, war, global degradation, economic crisis, earthquakes, everything is devastating. So that's what they call post. Post-normal realities are the realities which are characterized by chaos. Chaotic things happen anytime they get influence yours. War with Russia and Ukraine influences becomes even the religions, the food, the prices, everything. So that's the first thing you need to understand when you talk about the reality what we are. And Malaysia is not an exception. Malaysia is living in a very strategic place, but within this world, which is also having this characteristic of fear, complexity, and sometimes things are not normal. Therefore, one of the areas of capacity building of our NGOs and others who want to contribute to nation building which is awareness. Because why I'm saying this? Because we need new type of innovation to get these CSOs in this context, in these realities. Don't just think they are normal, they have this program today, programs, no. Any moment, all your programs can be stabilized by just resting at the yes. So we need to use programs which represents for what's happening and what will happen in the future. So presented, I think this is what I wanted to mention. That's narrative. I think this academic framework and approach gives us these opportunities for universities and people, schools, and the rest need to capitalize. I think, as I said in the beginning, when there is a way, and I think you are leading, and you always in Malaysia here to tell you this. Always our postgraduate students are with you here today, learning something, taking you as a leading models. So that's why I invited them by purpose to this and to see how they can transfer this or this way of this to here. And see. So brothers and sisters, with this, once again, I would like to reiterate it says is and we support you in whatever thing you can support and your presence today in this place. Our countries in Morocco and Algeria, when we receive we say today, your presence here is great, and I would like to thank Brother Jamal. It's a great chance, and actually to be enough of all. I would like to thank that it's our great yes, the curator and has is the hero. And our lecturers, our students, our scholars, our NGOs, or those I mentioned by name, those who are there by those of their names, or we know like Nama, like others, welcome. Yes, I do that. May Allah stay. I pray for your success. More and more these activities for patients. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
It's the second round of applause for the outstanding speech. Thank you, Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Birgaud, for your enlightening speech. As Rumi quotes that you were born with wings, why prefer to crawl? We as Muslim CSOs should go further beyond where we are today and where we are yesterday, where we were yesterday and we are today in nation building upon the principles of Madani sustainability, care, compassion, respect, innovation, prosperity, and trust, as stated by the Holy Quran. وهو الذي جعلكم خلائف الأرض ورفع بعضكم فوق بعض درجات يبلغ بما آتاكم سريع العقاب. Okay, we're supposed to give a token of appreciation to Prof. Abdul Aziz. All right. I take pleasure to invite our respected co-organizing chairman, CEO of AXIN, Tuan Haji IR Muhammad Jamaluddin Shamsuddin, and Honorable Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Birgaud, keynote speaker of forum today, to please come in front to deliver and receive tokens of appreciation. Thank you. Okay, the time has come where the forum will begin. Before I pass the session to our moderator, let me briefly introduce him to all of you. Associate Professor Dr. Daniel Muhammad Yusuf is an Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science, IIUM. He's also jointly appointed as a researcher at ISTAC, also an Associate Research Fellow at the National Higher Education Research Institute, USM, since 2012, and the Accounting Research Institute, UITM. He's also the MPO Assessor of Social Science since 2008 and a lifetime member of Pendapat. He was also a Fulbright Scholar and recipient of the British Chevening Scholarship. Daniel is currently Chief Editor of Intellectual Discourse and an editorial board member of journal Parliament Malaysia and the journal Polygraphy. He's also project leader of the IIUM multiple award-winning flagship project on peace building and civilization. Please welcome the outstanding Associate Professor Dr. Daniel Muhammad Yusuf as moderator of the forum. Please, Dr. Daniel.
Thank you very much for the in the past, all times, why and for the reminder that is about the Madani framework. It is an opportunity for us. We've actually been talking about for the longest times in this public body twice. Then before the concept of the Madani framework came about and government. At the same time, the Madani discourse itself is not necessarily and pelajaran forms and something that would actually running on the platform. Madani because what we speak people like our whole constitution of Madbasa, we know that the discussion of Madani itself had been an idea of gagasan by the then Prime Minister Lawrence. Essentially something as some opportunities. The current sense. In fact, it's also tiny because of when it's created. Why is it? Why is it? Also, we should. And one of the key features of the office is the functioning I feel that because I don't our on our on so on something that in the context of later. Of course, if I do something on previous quite some inputs about end of the forums, we do have a short question and answer on what we have breakout sessions in 5 where and docs and the idea at the end of the forum that they are able to connect dots, yes, but there's some resolutions that can perhaps put forward the had the experience in the past where such resolutions do have insights on the government that's case changes off or something check. Beneficials. So in regard to our forum, what is this? What is it? We are writing this times for those. So I will primary question that so we have 4 pieces analysis for today. First panel. The first panelist is called Patricia Sumbangan, who is the president of Buhari Trust. Your PhD is and Master of Science. With formerly was created and formative years studies. Thus, until its retirement. The Trump begins to sustain that called that was required meeting my touch and publicly also with average question that was posed was but start is how can schools get taxation forms? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I have a slide presentation. First of all, thank you for the kind introduction by the Professor Dr. Daniel. One Haji Jamal Zain Shamsuddin, the co-organizing panel, your tech team, and also my esteemed panelists. I'm sorry, I'm not able to the name of each one because we have limited time. And also my dear brothers and sisters from ISTAC and also from the NGOs and CSOs later. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Inshallah, I will investigate or expound on how can CSOs create tactics of advocacy and influence policies. Inshallah, from the standpoint or from the experience of Islam. Now, Islam actually has fashioned itself as a strategic partner in nation building. Since 2018, or 5 years ago, we created this tagline
And then we have the vision of making Malaysia a negara rahmah, or rahmah Malaysia. This was introduced in 2014. This was, of course, developed differently from Madani models. Developed on ones. Well, we like it to be owned by the public in Malaysia. It's not just from Islam, but to be owned by the rakyat or the public. Now, we have 12, we have already identified or outlined the 12 characteristics of the Rahmah system. We have 36 institutions under IKRAM. We have currently about 26,000 members. And then we have 115 branches of Malaysia, including and also 16 branches overseas. And we have yet certificate engagement with a lot of multiple. Now, in order to carry out the strategic partner initiative, we have embarked on a strategy of what we call agenda national, or national agenda. We focus on 5 areas: progressive societies, competition leadership, national economic strategies, and institutions for national bodies, and reform task force, reform teams, in order to promote these focus areas. We have also developed what we call a Rahmah Nation Index, or Index Negara Rahmah, to measure our progress and advancement in these focus areas. We listed the 12 characteristics of the Rahmah Nation, and we have also done the calls for 2021 and 2022. There is a slight increase in 2023 from the calls in 2021. But nonetheless, it still remains at the moderate level of about 6.5. We're going to launch a book soon, which is entitled Malaysia yang Secara Singkat. Malaysia. Ini betul-betul kita hear ni. Okay. Now, in terms of advocacy and also influencing policies, we have been invited in December last year by the Ministry of Women and Women, Family and Society Development to present proposals for the improvement of national family policy, Dasar Keluarga Negara. So this is our National Exco member, Dr. Sabaria, which has invited to give the proposals. Now, Fringe and National Family Policy has been in place for over 10 years. Covers its principles, and ISLAM presented several proposals for the improvement involving several policies and action plans. And these recommendations actually were initiated from the results of the Rahmah Family Index 2021, which was initiated by ISLAM itself. So from there, it's several procedures. The present government. Now, we have also embarked upon campaigns of Lelaki Zero Keluarga since 2019. Men at Zero the family because it's very important, family development. Men takes care of the family, protects, nurtures, cares for the family. They have to play their role. So that's why this campaign. Because in Malaysia, actually, family, whenever it concerns family matters, it falls upon the mothers, falls upon the women. But we are trying to get the stand also false, very much false to the development families. So we've done this, and also we did this impact program. Has covered for nearly 3,000 people in the whole. And for this, we got the Yayasan Hasanah grant of 300,000 to carry out this. Yes, due to the constraint of time and difficulty of more. But this is for improvement of academic achievement of children. But we are targeting not the children, but the parents. And the impact program. This is targeting the parents. Normally, when we say the improvement of academic achievement, we target the students. In this case, we target the parents to produce or to make a conducive environment for the children to excel.
And this is targeted mainly towards the field of service. There's the graduation ceremony as well. That's various places. And this is the carnival, family carnival, which we did last year, 2023. And this is at state level programs, also this is at state level programs, because we have our reach in every state in Malaysia. Again, all this has been, funded by Yayasan Hasanah and also by our own internal generation of funds. So because of all those programs that we did, we were invited to present proposals to the family ministry. Now, the other one that I would like to emphasize upon is the Ministry of Education. We went to on the 15th of December 2022 to present proposals to the present education minister, YB Fadlina Siddiq, and our head of education, Ikram, has been appointed as a member of the National Education Advisory Council, which we can. I think this is also another area that we want to embark upon advocacy and implementing policies in Malaysia. Our philosophy of Islamic education in Ikram Muslim, we emphasize on the Tawhidic approach, objective in developing and generating virtuous cases in a holistic civil standards and dynamics system guided by Al-Quran. The idea is to produce holistic individuals. Ikram Muslim Education Network, we have 56 schools all over Malaysia. We are the second biggest private education system after Dongzhong. Dongzhong is the Chinese private education system. We are the second biggest private education system. Again, we've done this for the past 30 years. Our first free school started in 40 years ago. So that means we have extensive experience in education. So that's why we can come with strong proposals, done set programs. We already have solutions for the educational programs, how to enhance education programs in Malaysia. This is a map of the Ikram Muslim School. We have schools in every state, including Sabah and Sarawak. We also developed the international policy rate assessment, and for this we have a bilateral arrangement with the Indonesian Board of the Malaysian Ministry of Education. Throughout new strategies implemented in some schools in Malaysia and also in Indonesia. This is the nota kerjasama perkhidmatan dalam bidang pentakdiran pendidikan education assessment. We done this in 2018. This idea of information policy assessment was developed from our experience in our school, and this is now developed. We have already developed with the Bangladesh of the Arts or the National Examination Board, the Ministry of Education, to develop the national policy rate assessment project. This is our cadet remaja sekolah. Kita memiliki development programs yang besar over the years. Benchmarking, we have formed also international now with Indonesia. Last year we did this MOU signing with Jaringan Sekolah Islam Terpadu for Indonesia. This is for Ministry of National Ministries, Kaliber kita anak Malaysia. This is last year also. And together with Ministry of National funding of the Ministry of National Ministries for this program. And these are the state level programs for National Ministries. And these are the posters for all the programs. So because of this, these are the engagement in 2022, 20 organizations involved in the National Ministry program that we did last year. So because of this, JCNIM, Jabatan Perpaduan Nasional, Jabatan Perpaduan Negara dan Integrasi Nasional, Ministry of National Security, wants to sit down with Trump next week, inshallah, to look at Trump's activities on nationality for 2023 with the possibility of joint venture and also funding for our. This is a national air quality framework where where professors who are members of Islam were involved with. These are our professors, group leaders involved with the development of the national air quality framework. It's still ongoing. With now, of course, it's interact with the Ministry of Alam Sekitar, Climate Change and Environment under YZ Legislation. These are my meetings together with the team of National Partners in the Parliament towards forming an APGG, All Party Parliamentary Group on Governance, Integrity and Anti-Corruption, last month. And he was supportive, but he has got to present this to Parliament first. Parliament agrees, then we can form the APGG on governance, integrity and anti-corruption. In summary, actually, CSOs can create effective advocacy and influence national policies. But we need to have a strategic mindset. What areas to focus on? What strengths do we have? How we should frame our what we want to present to the government and so on. We have to have that strategic mindset. We need to do quality research and also backup proposals with the data. We cannot talk about generic anymore. We cannot talk on the surface anymore. We have to come up with for policy proposals, but backed up with quality research and data. And towards this end, inshallah, we will we have already had some tension of a think tank, but we want to put think tanks for this particular work. We need to have proof of concept as well. We need to test run our policy recommendations on the ground. And alhamdulillah, to this extent, we have the state branches and so on. We have our schools, so we can test it, on the ground. And the other important thing, my dear brothers and sisters, we have to have also strategic collaboration, partnership with the CSOs. We cannot do it alone. IKRAM also cannot do it alone. Although we are a big organization, we are one of the biggest Islamic organizations in Malaysia, but we cannot do it alone. The work is just too much. We have to do it with other people, and that's why we do it in partnership with other CSOs and institutions. I mentioned just now Yayasan Hasanah. Actually, last year, 2022, we got 1 million ringgit from Yayasan Hasanah. And also, from the Middle Zealand state government, we also had another 1 million. So it's possible to get few millions from the agencies and the government agencies, and also from the funding agencies. It's possible. But you must have your track records. You must build a track record. You must build your network on the ground, and then people become confident. So that's it. In my point is, funding can come from various sources. If you have a track record, people will come to you. You don't need to go to other people, but people will come to you to find. Oh, this is what you've done great work, but we want to find you. Yayasan Hasanah now opening proposal for 2023. Inshallah, they don't have their principles. If any of you are also interested in this, you can also apply to Yayasan Hasanah. Because they are the CSF arm of Hasanah. Hasanah is the sovereign fund of Malaysia. So they developed this CSR arm, which they call Yayasan Hasanah. So they got lots of money. So they close and people can apply to get money from them. So my dear brothers and sisters, inshallah, if we do our work with sincerity, and we change ourselves, Professor Dr. Aziz Barraus is serious. Now, there was one besides already famous Algerian philosopher, Malik bin Nabi, very famous Algerian philosopher. He said once, I think it's also in truth, that in order to go against colonization, you have to remove the colonizability inside your own self. And then you must change your own self. It's the system that we can leave. We have the potential. Muslims have got the potential. We are Khara Ummah. Allah is put upon this. the capability and the mental toughness, the mental capability, the strength of mind to think out the strategies, the way to do it, so on. So you can use each other. So therefore, like use these capabilities in strategic collaboration, the resource, to build the networks, to prove ourselves, and inshallah, we can be effective advocacy and influence the policies of the place. So in this sense, we want to consider ourselves as partners. We develop the nation. I think we developed the checkline strategy partner in nation building 5 years ago. We are continuing on with it. Now we have a big opportunity with the current kerajaan persatuan to do this. And inshallah, with your help and also with your support, I think we can do this. First, we have to become a better nation. Not only national, but everything. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, thank you. I think, well, really helpful in helping us for the financing that is ministry. I think to a certain extent it includes complex most of the values that are educated with minority work and at the same time we do all the best of luck. It's like I can't keep all of them are considered. The last website I got to have had this sponsors of finance. Being on for our secretary of the deputy of the services. It's good to know that you actually manage your time. Something actually of engineering, bio semester, biotechnology. And it's been deputy policy was also appointed. And now it's vital for matches of and it's been involved in many campaigns and meaning markets, meaning business development program, these things. Points. So, margin, other design materials, things. Don't forget this. Next year, from the system is on.
Assalamualaikum everyone. I am Muhammad Jamal from school, your experts, lecturers, participants, esteemed panelists, brothers and sisters. I have been given the topic of challenges of the successful interventions to create a successful intervention. Perhaps in this concept, I will share the point of view of Islamic elite as one of the international experiences, as well as of how we move forward, fight all the challenges, and how we carry our mandate without forgetting our roles. So before I proceed further on challenges, allow me to put some things actions on some solutions. So that gives us sense. So basically, Islamic unit is a faith in science. Practice of Islamic Islam, inspire international humanity and development, where we focus on its efforts to save and provide solutions to the world's most vulnerable youth. And guided by Islamic history, with the principles and values underlying the Islamic history, we encompass our work with five values of Islam, that is Adil, Rahmah, Islam, well as humanity. So these became our values that hold on to the relevant forms for our response. And established in 1984 after this year, we are now having active presence in more than 45 countries. Assisting individuals, families, as well as communities through our emergency response and also development programs. Typically, allow us to have more than 10 million people this year, and least contributing directly to and national sustainable services. More than 150. We are our 100 permanent officers. We feel best awarded by NGO advisors as one of the top 10 world and the CSOs in three main areas, that is impact, innovation, as well as governance in different categories such as business crisis, sustainable justice, social justice, also economic. So, I do not organization transforms from very small organizations starting off with 10% of the nations into the multi-million value of affairs. And of course, that denies that the most important part to transform our organizations is to establish its foundation at grassroots level. Because this has been done via community outreach and we give strong community connections. During the establishment of Islamic religions, there are many engaged among diaspora communities in Europe as well as North America. And as time goes by, the source communities use for this Islamic religion. And very soon, for the future, where there is growing in terms of humanitarian assistance and also lots of ongoing conflicts and disasters. And the second one, roles of the group. As been mentioned earlier by our seven channels, the CSO is actually the main role is execute. And for Islamic religion, because the other side of the world, we are suffering, whereas the other side of the world, lots of resources. So we became the bridge between all those resources to be given to the other side. So in fact, even though we may not manage to do everything, but at least with the engagement, with the several engagement of different stakeholders, volunteers, alhamdulillah, we try to cover as much as we can. And in some countries, unlike in Malaysia, because in Malaysia we do have zakat authorities, very structured and well organized. But in some big countries, where Muslims, they don't have that kind of opportunity like what we have in Malaysia. So we become the bridge. We provide the service to allow those community to fulfill their obligations, their religious obligations, such as paying zakat, such as perform kurban and others. So with this, it makes us one of the significant roles. Constant connecting people who are close. Because as we can see in more than 45 countries, some people might say Islamic would never cease. Because why? The moment Islamic is in Malaysia close, we open up in Muslim and so on. It's not that I'm not using, but that's the kind of metaphor. So, yeah. So that's because the need growing. And if the our presence in those countries. And unfortunately, even though we are state-based organizations, for our release to start with this, we start with religious. But unfortunately, most of the countries is impacted affected with ongoing conflict and justice are our brothers and sisters. As growing organizations, especially at international level, as much as we are clear on our objectives, while to establish Islamic beliefs, but there are numbers of challenges that we face, especially in social aspects, financial aspects, and political aspects. I would say it's not just Islamic beliefs, any CSOs. With before at international level, you will see a different atmosphere, what kind of challenges that we are facing. And but in the context of Islamic beliefs, because Syria, the name of Islam itself, and especially our presence in most of these where Muslim minorities, it creates stigma. And some might think that we did Dawah, we are Dawah organizations, but actually we are not. We are purely humanities that we are facing. But it's just allowing people out there to face different perspectives for ours. And as this stigma doesn't enough, we also affected by Islamophobia. Really, because our names, because of our logos. But, and this will allow many aspirations, even discrimination by the. And you can see, if you Google, you might find a lot of negative stories, a lot of negative fears, false accusations that seem stress to us. Even though we know that intention may not to the organization, but it actually was Islam. We spend a lot of time in our community, our resources fighting against this, even though we don't want to put our resources into this, but we have to. And some might say, why do you use Islamic religion? Why don't you teach it? Private practices, because of this smart, because of the Islamophobia, it is more reason for us. We need to prove
people out there that even we are Islam organization, faith-based organization, we are similar like other faith-based organization. We can perform our work professionally. We can comply with whatever restriction and compliance that they do, and we can do things differently. And some more, we wanted to prove that we are peace religions. It brings aid, it brings relief to the people. So that's the reason why. And as much as we are very clear on this, the social challenges that we face actually contribute towards the financials and also political. In fact, the other two challenges, I would say in financial, most of the countries that we work are very complex, very environment, very unstable, ongoing armed conflicts, even big disaster, they are underdeveloped countries and so on. So in terms of financial management, fund management, to all banks, we are considered high risk. And sometimes this definitely will directly affect our effectiveness. In some countries, big developed countries, they even give instruction overnight for us to pull out our fund. Imagine 500 orphans. They instruct us to pull fund. It's just overnight. But fortunate that because we are a big family, we have each other to cover this and make sure that this orphan continue to be sponsored. And also, we experience where we have projects, $1 million project in Afghanistan. We used to transfer without any problem. But it's just a matter of, they just tell that we are high risk. It takes months for us to transfer, and the projects are delayed in start. So this is kind of financial challenges that we are facing. And not to mention other countries like Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, Gaza, and others. So it's an ongoing challenge, but we do believe as long as we maintain good governance, we comply all the process, definitely we will come out clean and be able to proceed with the implementations. And for intern in Palestine, we used to have our operation in both West Bank and Gaza since 1998. But unfortunately, with the ongoing attempts to make sure failure in our operations, unfortunately, in 2018, we need to close down our operation in West Bank after several attempts, ransack and so on. So we need to close down. But we still have, standing strong in Gaza. We still have our operation in Gaza with more than 100 staff. But we have to make sure, because we manage operation with a lot of cautions. We screen all our partners, we screen all our suppliers, even staff. We need to do background check. And at the same time, we do this just to make sure that there's no risk that our funding being used in a wrong way. And we also have regular audit of our operations just to, and have multiple safeguards to ensure that fund is used appropriately. So, brothers and sisters, all the process, they are not cheap. They cost us fortune, but we need to do it. And in terms of political, in some countries, especially when Muslim are minority, it is a very easy vote. You will get easy vote when you suppress the minority in some big countries, and that includes us. And sometimes they just give statement, and the next day it create chaos to our office. And even some office, because of the political change, we need to close down. We experienced that in Egypt. Same. And also, because we are present in very unstable countries, some of the policy are very inconsistent. At one day, you are allowed to do your operation. By the very next day, you are required to get out from the place. So that kind of situation we face every now and then. And Alhamdulillah, these are among the three of the biggest threats. And we become the target because of who we are, because we are the Islamic organization, and also because of the size. But among the challenges, aside of all the challenges, what more important are how we overcome all the challenges and continue to grow. As I mentioned before, with all the threats, with all the obstacles from social, from financial, from political, what most important is actually to strengthen our presence globally through governance. I know it's very expensive, it's very time consuming, it takes a lot of efforts, but it is very important in our situation, in our position, that we develop very strong governance. And how we develop and strengthen our governance as we grow globally is actually by having appropriately skilled, knowledgeable staff. This is very important, especially to understand legal requirements across countries that we work, because we are in more than 45 countries. So we need to have somebody that well versed in those countries. And we need to continuously developing and reviewing all the process to ensure they are strong from a compliant lens. This is what I mentioned. It's very time consuming. It needs a lot of efforts. And at the same time, while reviewing, while developing process, we also need to be aware of all potential risks that try to mitigate them as best as possible. And whenever we look for solutions, we must not think the solution for now is for the future. For instance, I've been with Islamic nearly 15 years, and I've experienced, I think, thrice or more that we've been hacked globally. And this hacking is not just an ordinary parties. It's very we call it high risk and high potential parties. And what we learn from that it's very important for us to build a system that can make us resilient, not for that particular first time that we've been hacked, but also for the rest of the time. To make sure that the moment we've been hacked, within 1 hour, we will able to activate our website and other digital platform. So this is very important. And what more important is for whatever process that we have, for whatever process that we have in place, we must ensure that every country office understand the local requirement and work around this. At global level, we have a certain standard process, guidelines, code of conducts, but we need to suit it at global and local level. So whatever we have from worldwide, it is our responsibility at Malaysia to study and to see and to adapt in our local requirements. And number two is actually the local footprints. It is very important that when you work across the globe, you need to aware that it is your responsibility to develop the local community. And to maximize our impact, we must build the community resilience. And Islamic Relief, we develop the local capacity and local partners to work alongside us in delivering the effective aid and development. We establish our operation locally for each countries. For instance, when in Turkey and Syria, we've been there since 2011. And with the capacity of 160 staff on the grounds, they are local people. So when the earthquake hit recently, within 1 hour, they're already on the ground. And within few hours, the aid is already distributed. Why? Because we have our established warehouse, we have our established suppliers, well connected with the government and others. So when you empower and establish your local presence, it helps you to be more effective in distributing and also in terms of cost. So our commitment to working with communities and local actors and organizations in an inclusive manner enable us to respond timely. And this is one of the advantage. And I believe it should be one of the criteria if you want to go international for CSO. And the third one, establish external relations. With all due respect to the challenges that we face, false accusation, negative story with the media, we must have very expert external relations. Strong PR and media is essential. And advocacy and engagement side must be strengthened. So we need to do constant lobbying and continuous educating and awareness people outside about who we are, so that we can reduce or we can reduce the whatever perception that has been built, and also build good rapport and relationship with the government for long-term engagement. And having a great communication is a bonus. I think it's a need for everyone. We must have a great communication team in order to help us to educate the public. And also through global advocacy, push for positive change, particularly on climate change, gender justice, and forced displacement in the context of Islamic perspective. It is very important because we work in countries with, especially those countries that in needs, majority are Muslim. Sometimes they have different perception on our practices. So it is our roles during advocacy to educate those people about the right things from Islamic perspective. And in terms of outreach, this is very vital because when you are Islamic organization, that doesn't mean you restrict yourself to engage with Islamic community. We go beyond. In Malaysia, we do partnership with non-Islam organization as well, non-Muslim organization as well. And in fact, we also have one of our icon, the Chinese, Dr. Su Wincy. So because it's very clear that even though we are Islamic organization, we go beyond race and religion. So, and because of our presence, having more strategic partners in country where we have no office also is one of the approach that can strengthen our presence. So with these opportunities, things, governance, local footprints, established external relation and broad outreach, it actually strengthened the family of the organization across the global, safeguarding the organization from threats and challenges, and also allow us for a continuous growth and innovation. And inshallah, my last slide, our roles towards the nation building. It has been our principle that whatever things that we are doing, whatever programs that we are designing, we must associate with empowerment, sustainability, and high resilience. And towards nation buildings, of course, our aims is to address the most disadvantaged families and their communities by empowering them to overcome poverty and as well as vulnerability. This is not going to be an easy process. In order to help them to establish the sustainable income and livelihood, it takes time. In order for them to build resilience, it may take years. But we have to be committed into this. And for each country that we work, there are additional local contexts of specific drivers. We need to understand what are the global humanitarian drivers that can affect these vulnerable communities, such as ongoing conflicts, disasters, climate change, and many more. Because these humanitarian drivers will actually affect the communities and deny their access in terms of food, education, healthcare, even livelihood and employment. So by understanding the humanitarian global drivers, we can address and design our programs impactful. And our roles and responsibility, the important roles and responsibility, number one is we became the voices of the people in need. We need to stand alongside to support and enable engagement of people to address the root causes of the poverty. Not just giving them food, but also to understand and able to bring them out of the poverty. And with our integrated programs and approach, combining our humanitarian emergency response, sustainable livelihood, and other long-term programming, we will address the impact of those root causes within the families and poverty. And these are actually, we have a very dedicated team to do this at global level. And they are very expert in whatever problems happen across the globes. So these need to be done by people with appropriate knowledge and skill. And for emergency life-saving response, it is most effective response are those in which local partners are being empowered. Like I mentioned in Turkey, we have to establish our local footprints, we have to establish our local presence, and as well as develop the capacity locally in order to make them deliver the aid effectively. And on our work on the longer term in terms of resilient buildings with communities, partners, and other actors will include working with them on risk reduction and preparedness for future crises. During emergency, yes, we do give aid to relieve the burdens, but at the same time, we need to educate them in terms of disaster risk reduction and preparedness, so that it can mitigate the risk whenever the disaster strikes again. Because some people, they live in a prone disaster area. They just live there, continue to stay there for generations. So what more important is to educate them on how they can survive for the next disaster. And the second one is training communities and partners and others to deliver life-saving emergency response. Whenever we present, we engage with lots of partners. Even though there's no Islamic relief presence, we work with the local organizations and empower them. And in some countries, integrating community partners and government climate change adaptation in our programs. So this is something like in Somalia, because you know that water is very scarce, it's a drought. So they work with local government in terms of climate change adaptation program and work with communities on peace building and conflict management. So we understand that in order to come out with a program, it's not just a matter of providing relief and you feel okay with that. It is our responsibility to think about the value for money, the impact of each program that we design. And I can say that, for instance, in Malaysia, in terms of sustainable livelihood, even every region, we have different approach. For instance, in Peninsula, we focus more in income generation by small businesses. We identify families that have the potential to become an entrepreneur. We give their knowledge. We enhance their skill in terms of financial management and marketing. And for instance, one of the entrepreneur, previously, she just generated income of 500 ringgit per month. And after she completed 6-month programs with us, she managed to generate 20,000 per month. So we believe that with the right way, with the right approach, it can be impactful. And for instance, in Sabah, may not be similar in Peninsula. So in Sabah, we know that the communities are towards farming. So we come up with the programs, smart farming. They call it hydroponics, first stage, because they are just the beginner. So when they already being well equipped with hydroponic knowledge, they will be upgraded into aquaponic. So whenever we design a programs, it's not just a matter of giving help to the communities, but able to make them grow as well. So I think that's all from me. And I just want, before I end the session, I just want to say that in order to make a very impactful program, we must have a very dedicated team. And I would say in Islamic relief, we do have staff that have been working for 30 years, 20 years, 15 years within the family. They are very dedicated. And this actually is a good sign to show that we are very serious in delivering these responsibilities. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Madam Siti Fadila. It's heartening to listen of the achievements of Islamic relief. At the same time, as you mentioned, there are, of course, challenges, right? And rightly so, you mentioned about the difficulty in dealing with governments, with states, the changing of policies because of the changing of governments and so on. And this brings us to our third speaker, of course. The purpose of having this forum is not to sing praise for all CSOs, but we're looking at issues as well. What is problematic in, for example, Malaysia's landscape? And for that, we have Dr. Sharifah Nur Shahida. So let me introduce her for a bit. She is a lecturer in the political science program at UKM. Her research interests are cultural politics and labor movements. She's also published several books and articles, among them Punk, Penentangan dan Politik Transnasionalisme, Braver dan Hipster. So really catchy stuff actually. Ekspresi sub-budaya remaja di Kuala Lumpur, subaltern identities, I suppose, yeah. And Kesatuan Sekerja dan Hubungan Kerjaan, artikel sorotan. So the thing about Dr. Sharifah is that I managed to get in touch with her because of an article that she submitted to Intellectual Discourse, which will be inshallah coming out in June. And because it has a very different, I think, discourse on the civil society landscape in Malaysia. So I decided to invite her here so that she can share her ideas on some of the challenges pertaining to the relationship between state and society, or state and civil society in Malaysia. So without further ado, I invite Sharifah Roshni.
Hello. Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to all of you, okay, brother and sister. Firstly, I would like to say thank you to the organizer for inviting me to this seminar and for giving me the opportunity to talk about civil society organization. To answer your question, how does the government or the state perceive the role of CSO in nation building? Generally, we know that civil society is the bridge between the state and the people. By civil society, I mean the entire variety of organized group and institutions that are independent of state and voluntary. However, the NGOs, like the one in this room, I think are the most prominent and the most important subset of CSO. They should respect the rule of law, individual liberty, and right and the freedom of others. And beside that, tolerance, diversity, and pluralism are some of the connotation of the word civil. Yes, CSO are recognized by the state as a partner in development, since for the most part, they are the organization best able to connect with the people. Besides, CSO also help to strengthen and defend democracy. Larry Diamond, 1994, listed several number of CSO role. This role include limiting state power and holding politicians accountable, offering an alternative platform for democratic discourse or political participation, enhancing the political value of society, developing a better awareness of the right and obligation of others, and also, many more. Okay. Furthermore, civil society can help the state in realizing local development and nation building. They have been playing a significant role in the public policy process by responding to the current issue and giving criticism on certain policy making process. Recently, the state seems to be opening the door more widely for the involvement of CSO, for example, by engaging them in forum, seminar, appointing them as committee member, commission member, or senate member, representative in dialogue, and many more. There are also some CSO that receive state support and funding, especially those that share the same view with the state. Consequently, the state also may co-opt the civil society. But at the same time, several CSO are still typically regarded as a threat or as being against the state national interest. The state actually has already enacted several prohibited legislation that deter the CSO liability, especially the political NGO, to exercise their fundamental right. Some of them had to register as a company so that they can move and operate more freely without many restrictions. Therefore, there are some CSO that might become a partner to the government, or there are also other CSO that become swing player. However, in my opinion, the description of civil society and civility raise pertinent issue on the future of our civil society and democracy in our country. My research, our research together with Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Taqiyuddin Ismail, also from my university, UKM, are looking deeper into this context. This because, in general, the so-called CSO in our country are located in urban areas, predominantly made up of non-Malay, prefer to use English language, and fight for middle class issue. The formation of civil society organization like this is typically regarded as a progressive phenomenon and satisfies the requirement of a democratic system. However, this civil society organization and some scholars tend to categorize the organization that support racial inclusivity or identity politics as uncivil society or anti-democratic, particularly the Malay Islamic NGO. At the same time, this phenomenon frequently targets the uncivil society as being unfriendly to democratic practice. Leaders and academics from the Western also frequently refer them as conflict trigger and not good for pluralism or diversity. This repeated narrative, including from the media, has supported the idea that CSO fighting for democracy, human rights, good governance, and others are the only organization that can be considered as part of civil society. Meanwhile, the Malay Islamic NGO, which is known to have anti-democratic tendency, is normally concentrated in uncivil society category. This dichotomy shows that there is no balanced study and analysis in civil society studies. We therefore seek to address whether Malaysia civil society can truly be said to demonstrate civility as it is frequently defined. Is it accurate to say that Malay Muslim NGO is example of uncivil society? Why is there room for such contrast? Why is there this difference? Often, the idea of civil society disregard the notion that CSO may also have weakness as clientelism or hierarchy. Yet, classifying NGO as uncivil group based on race, nationalism, religion, populism, or reactionism would ignore the fact that they actually also represent the opinion of their followers who come from the lower class, from the ordinary class, and from the grassroots. Furthermore, funding has an inevitable relationship with the civil society development. This claim benefit in reaching the individual for whom help is intended has come under increased scrutiny due to the motive of funder, political influence, organizational constraint, and internal agenda. Besides, serious weaknesses in CSO ability, accountability, transparency, integrity, and capacity to address equality issue have come to light. Due to this, the community is becoming increasingly skeptical of their effectiveness, and the previously positive global perception of the CSO has changed to the one that is more critical and even called into their legitimacy. They are now frequently seen as mainly supporting themselves and their own agenda, as well as that of their funder, rather than serving as a voice for the people or for the grassroots organization. Moreover, because all programs follow similar framework and start from the top, marginalized people, the community, are unable to contribute their point of view from their specific local context and setting. In the end, CSO see more like an organization or association of people who have come together, brought together for various reasons, such as self-interest, which take priority over effort to advance the common good and common interest. Issues such as exploitation, sexual harassment, and others also occur in the civil society organization. This thing then lead to the question of NGOization of civil society or NGOization of resistance. Diversity in Malaysia democratic environment is unlikely to be observed without civil society organization like NGOs. Indeed, they provide a forum for society to express itself and demand rights. And this group continue to be important player in the democratic process. However, it is important to consider this problem in their overall context. There is no assurance that the growth of NGOs and other civil society organizations in Malaysia will result in social transformation or democratization. Additionally, power relation may exist between NGO, inside the NGO, or between NGO and the community. Furthermore, some of them lack a local focus and are structured to carry out a program or project under a budgetary restriction or predetermined timetable. Because of the program short duration or short time, it may be challenging to evaluate its success. NGO and other civil society groups often become more corporate, bureaucratic, and institutionalized because of the institutionalism and professionalism, putting more emphasis on organizational sustainability than on attempting to mobilize and organize the community. In addition, they are also unable to internalize effective governance. Therefore, the term civil and civil reform and NGOization of resistance should be considered in order to better comprehend and analyze the movement of NGO in Malaysia and other civil society organizations in our country. Therefore, in conclusion, there are various perceptions on the role of civil society organization. However, the organization itself also ensure that they maintain their reputation, civility, and impartiality in any matter. Furthermore, group perceived as civil society organization in Malaysia are not necessary to be an absolute example of civility. Ethnicization of knowledge is one of the reasons why the definition civil society tend to be considered a positive element and ignore the uncivil element it may contain. Besides, groups that are considered as an uncivil society in Malaysia also play an important role in the development of democracy and also seen close with the grassroots people. As long as their struggle does not involve violence, they might be considered as civil society. I think that concludes my talk. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that there will be many questions as a follow-up to your speech just now. Now we move on to the fourth speaker, Edin Hu, yeah, who is a poet, writer, translator, journalist, and jazz musician. Yeah, he omitted that out. He's got an album coming out later this year. So I've been guaranteed an invitation to the launch of the album and a live performance as well. And of course, Edin is somebody who is most familiar in the Malaysian context pertaining to discussions on nation building, especially Rukun Negara. He will extend the invitation, I'm sure. So Edin Hu is a senior fellow at ISIS. Which ISIS? I leave it to him to explain. I think a lot of people with ISIS, they have to explain themselves. He's also the founder, of course, of Pusaka, one of the region's leading cultural centers. The question given to him is on culture and heritage activism and how it contributes to nation building. But of course, he's free to elaborate on Negara, nation building, and of course, the role of civil society in space. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that revealing introduction. And I'd like to commend my speakers before me. The papers were really quite excellent. Fadila and Dr. Sharifa in particular. Now, I've got about 15 minutes. I know we're pressed for time, so give and take 5 minutes or so. Let me try and compress the things that I have to say, and especially in response to a lot that was said here. We live in a very interesting time, and when we're talking about the nation state, and I think we live in an age where most citizenry is very cynical about the nation state and what the nation state is capable of and what it actually delivers to its citizens. Everywhere we lived, somebody, I think it was a professor who raised the term or this prefix post-normal. And we live in a very post-everything age, post-modern, post-normal, post-climate, which does not augur well for a state of the world that is in any sense of communion or in any sense of real interaction. In Malaysia, I think the question of nation building is a very, very important one. And I'm due to be sitting next to the DG, Department of National Unity. He should be here, but I have a bottle instead. So what is very interesting is this notion of what the nation stands for today. Among my other jobs is a journalist. I've been a journalist for 33 years. And one of the very interesting things I realized and recognized and found out and discovered in my travels in the last general election in Malaysia, as we opened up our democratic space to include younger voters, and we look at democracy essentially as not just a participatory process, but an educative process, I think our nation is in serious crisis. This is the first election I've come across where there's been a whole opening of new voters who are so unaware what elections are about and who vote with no sense of memory at all. That has been of deep anxiety and concern to me. Because we have, as Daniel pointed out, we have been a maturing democracy. But I would like to add, not since 2018, but since 1998. And if we look at 1998 as the watershed of our political maturity, we basically ask what 1998 was about. This was Reformasi, of course. And it was not just about the fracturing of a very centralized political party and political entity. It was about an entire citizenry that was ready to question a national narrative that had been constructed for close to, at that time, 50 years, 55 years, and now we're into 65 years. It's a very long conversation to have. It's a very long and deep introspection that is conducted. But one of the things that political entities don't realize was that the Reformasi movement was not about just challenging political authority. It was about asking very deep questions about ourselves as a nation, where we came from, what our history is about, and what our foundational sources were. We are still in the process, I think, of having that conversation. That's one of the very positive and encouraging things, I think, about how Malaysian society has evolved. And one of the things I always tell my friends in politics is that I think our society is a lot more mature and a lot more intelligent and a lot more evolved than our political process and our political protagonists. This is one of the great things I think we have to address and grapple with. So when we talk about a democratic society in a nation that is constantly evolving, I think this concept of the civil society, but essentially participatory forces in democracy is a very important question to ask. We have had civil society interaction for a very, very long time throughout, from the beginning of this nation. If you look, for example, at educational movements and things like that, whether they were church-based or whether they were faith-based, we've had that kind of interaction for a very long time. What has, of course, evolved is the more political nature of many of these movements, from one that is rooted in a kind of sedekah mentality or charity, to one that is really engages with the idea of civil society activism, if I may use that term, as a form of social investment. Yeah, that we invest in society rather than just dish out charity. And society is not based on empathy and sympathy alone, but on real ideas of progress and exchange. But we are always grappling, and this was one of the first two things that was brought up by the keynote speaker and my brother Jamal, about, on the one hand, resources, and on the other hand, vision. And vision can sometimes be very romantic. And while I do appreciate very much the exhortation, the idealism presented by the professor, it's a little more complicated than that. I think infrastructure is needed, structure needs to be created, and I think the state has to be held accountable in terms of how it disperses its resources, especially since it is able to disperse its resources very, very lavishly to people who choose to move from one aisle of parliament to another. I don't see why it can't, provide resources for work that really matters. CSO culture also needs to come under some scrutiny, and I'm very glad that Jamal brought up the issue of funding, and in particular transnational funding for certain kinds of work. Because I do believe we are in quite a perilous, subliminally perilous situation as far as agency is concerned. I think there's a lot of colonialism, really, and colonizing that goes on in what I consider an NGO industry these days, especially in this age of ridiculous wokeism and ideological territorializing. Although I would take exception to describing this culture as liberal, I'm very uncomfortable sometimes with the way the word liberal, the term liberal, has been hijacked, in particular in societies like ours, where in the prelude to our constitution, proclamation of our constitution, Malaysia is described as a liberal society. In the prelude to our Kunagara national pillars, Malaysia is again reiterated as a liberal society, and we live in we basically conduct this conversation within the halos of a tradition of knowledge that was, I think, one of the first of the liberal traditions of knowledge in the world, Islam. Liberal enough to have, for example, initiate multi-faith dialogue in a very concrete and substantial way and profound way from the translation of Greek philosophers to interreligious dialogue in India. And the contours of openness and not even tolerance, but understanding and empathy that we find everywhere in Southeast Asia, but which Southeast Asians come to forget very easily. So again, we need to redefine all those terms and what it means to us. I don't think the concept of liberal can be confined once again to a completely Western tradition, which it is not. Neither can it be confined merely to what we engage in as personal people. But again, that's a question of memory. Because we don't remember what's in our constitution. We don't remember what's in our Nurukun Negara. Neither do we have meaningful conversations about it. Rather, we have yearly competitions about who can recite the 5 principles the best. And none of that has actually changed, even as our society matures and democratizes. Just a little word then about my organization, Pusaka. So on the one hand, in ISIS, which is the research center, yeah. If my life gets desperate enough, I may consider the other kind of ISIS, but we're not there yet. But in nation building in ISIS, and then on the other hand in Pusaka, which is a cultural organization, I deal a lot with the idea of cultural memory. And most of us in Southeast Asia and in many other Asian societies and developing world societies are still highly oral traditions, oral cultures. A lot of these things have passed down generationally. They encapsulate a worldview. They encapsulate the life and behavior patterns and belief systems of a people that have come to be marginalized or forgotten in the process of greater and greater literacy. So I work with shadow puppeteers, and I work with healers, and I work with people engaged in community therapy, storytelling not as a way to entertain, but storytelling as genealogy and lineage and so on, which of course has come in Malaysia under a great deal of pressure from religious and cultural politics and politics of all kinds. And what we try and do is basically intellectualize many of these traditions and stop them from being vilified and cast as somehow today, just backward traditions or things that don't sit well with the modern world, which is really nonsensical. What it does is really it deprives you of any kind of cultural foundation. So culturally, Southeast Asia and Malaysia in particular is in a very restive and restless place because its point of origin is becoming more and more vague. Yet its present impulse is to constantly compartmentalize and territorialize itself. So those contradictions bring a lot of very painful sometimes inner cultural psychologies that are shaken. Now, just to address the question of where we play a role, on the one hand, we have to look at things like what CSOs role actually is. There are many of them now, but what is the attention actually given to civil society organizations? Sometimes as partners, sometimes as an indulgence, sometimes as people who need to be tolerated, but I don't really see a partnership. Sometimes we appear there as advisory people, and we give a lot of advice, which is then not incorporated into any kind of firm and sustained and consistent policy. I hope that changes now in our Madani society. I'm very, very supportive of the Madani concept, but since its rollout in the past 2 weeks, I see it being presented in the same way that all our other concepts were presented in several principles by the National Unity Department models. So I'm not sure whether it will breed the kind of confidence. I was very supportive of Islam Hadari too. I think as a concept, as a philosophy, it was quite radical, but eventually it filtered down to constructing tires using Islam Hadari principles, or making furniture according to Islam Hadari. I was also quite supportive of One Malaysia. I saw nothing principally wrong about it. But in the end, we discovered it was just engineered to prop up the particular personality of a prime minister. And then when it failed, it was dropped. And a kind of racial, religious politics crept up in its purpose. And then we see Keluarga Malaysia and God knows how many more that have come. So unless we are able to make this civilization concept truly one that inspires consultative approaches, it will go down as once again another failed attempt that is bureaucratized, that is rolled out by a bureaucracy, and people are instructed to behave a certain way. And so the cynicism towards anything that the state can actually deliver will only get found, not breed any kind of encouragement. I think the sad thing about the Madani concept is that even as it was introduced, it was already greeted with so much cynicism as a result of all of our past failures. So what actually needs to be done? What needs to be done? What is to be done? Lenin's great phrase. I think what needs to be done is a whole restructuring. We can't actually underestimate what a revolutionary situation we are in. Actually, revolutions can be very silent and they can be very impactful. But we need to be highly, highly creative. We need to be highly, highly imaginative. And I think we have to begin a very sustained quarrel with the way we are administered. I like the social activist Ralph Nader once said that when you meet a government official, they will always impress upon you that I have 33 years in government, experience in government. And he says they should be reminded that they have 1 year's experience repeated 32 times. And we are in that kind of state at the moment. There's a lot actually that needs to be done from very basic foundational level. non-government actors, civil societies. How do you register? With great difficulty. We don't even have a charity act here. My organization, Pusaka, has been functioning for 21 years. We deal and work with communities, and not just in the documentation work, but for example, in Kelantan during the time of the lockdown, and Kelantan had very serious lockdowns. Yeah, some of them. People had no food, so Pusaka, gathered resources together, and we fed 830 families for 3 months because the state was just unable to provide anything in Kelantan in particular. But we remain a Sendirian Berhad. We should be a foundation, which should be the easiest thing in a society to form. You go to the UK, it's £1. In Singapore, I think it's $10. Over here, you need 1 million ringgit. Which kind of NGO that does our work has 1 million ringgit that we would not choose to spend on our communities? And here's the rationale for needing a 1 million ringgit paid up capital. Because foundations abuse their status. And in my meeting with the eminent persons in 2018, I told Tan Sri Zeti, who was the one who came up with this policy, I said, it's the very people who abuse their foundation status who can afford the 1 million. Things like Yayasan Akal this and Yayasan be this and whatever. Or, Prime Minister's Wives Foundation. They have lots of money to put up 1 million paid capital and then abuse their status. Of course they do. But where do we fit? Right? So regulation is one thing. The conversations we have is also a very, very difficult thing. Where is private enterprise in all this conversation? They make lots of money, and they are bound apparently by corporate social responsibility. But all they basically do is give a couple of school bags and maybe a few computers to, underprivileged children. Who even uses that language these days? But it's used by our CSR people, underprivileged children. So really, really kind of primitive in the approach, societal approach, right? There are things, for example, in the culture world that needs great transformation. Over here, we look at cultural work, essentially as singing and dancing and having a good time. And this concert and batal, that concert, and this concert bole and all that nonsense. Culture is the way of life of the people. Right? One of the civil society sectors that is completely marginalized and again seen as an indulgence is the intellectual sector. People who do translation work. Our universities are underfunded. I don't know what the funding of ISTAC is like, but I am quite sure you could do with a great deal more. So that side of things, and we hope that again in this Madani society, led by our Renaissance Prime Minister, that we can have some confidence that a great deal more of resources can be apportioned to societies like this. Funding is very whimsical. Government perspective is always often also very oppositional to non-state players. That has to completely change. And of course, it's part of a larger conversation and a large struggle we have of making government accountable, because we are still at a very nascent level in making government accountable. This is all the more difficult in a world intellectual landscape that is getting increasingly reductive. I'm concluding my last point here. Because we are now basically reduced to this idiot thing, the phone. And as a media practitioner myself, I despair. I'm giving up journalism next year, I think, because it's impossible to operate within a media landscape that is all about chasing clicks, having no attention. And I'm a newspaper man, so I started out in the press when we read long articles, and when We didn't mind reading transcripts of interviews that went into 3 pages. But the attention span of most people today is 33 seconds, which makes you essentially a neurological reader. Sorry to use that term, but it is what it is. And we're creating a numbskull culture. And the media then is also hijacked by all kinds of agendas. I used to participate very much in the world media. I was Australian Broadcasting Corporation correspondent for 3 years. I widely from everyone from European newspapers, Australian newspapers, Japanese, Hong Kong, everything. You just don't have that kind of space anymore. Because when you talk about Islamophobia, it's very much present. The Guardian, for example, regarded as a liberal newspaper. You see, this is why I get very upset about the way this term liberal is constantly bandied about. A couple of years ago, I'll give you an example. I was asked to write an article on the resurgence of Islam in Indonesia. And I was absolutely delighted in those days, when you wrote a comment piece, you could go up to about 1,500 words. But I was asked to write it in 700 words. And I told my dear friend, one of the leading editors in The Guardian, that 750 words, you must be crazy. I need about 1,200, 1,500. He said, no, 750, that's all I need, 750 to 800. And I opened The Guardian on the day, I didn't write the piece in the end. And I opened the day the piece was supposed to come out. And I read a whole page, this is a broadsheet, we're talking a broadsheet, talking about the sex lives of 80-year-olds in Britain. So 750 words for the rise of resurgent Islam in Indonesia, and one whole broadsheet piece, which would be about 2,000 words, on the sex life of 80-year-olds in the UK, the British. They were bad at it then, they're bad at it now, they're bad at it always. So this obsession. So the media, all those arms which can bring this conversation, I think, are being reduced. So I think one of the great challenges for us now, CSO life, is to how we find the channels to have a constant and sustained conversation. Problem with government, of course, also is today one policy, next day another policy. Today you're my friend, so I'll see you today, I won't see you tomorrow. And governments increasingly in Malaysia have a tendency to, in Malaysia in particular, to kill a good thing. If you have really something that's reasonable, rational, and can help begin to open up spaces for interminable issues here, like race, religion, education, culture, and so on, that's the one thing they have to kill. So that's become pathological. But let me just answer the question finally. How does culture and heritage activism contribute to nation building? I don't like the term activism. My organization never uses it. I also don't like the term heritage or preservation. I don't like the term heritage because it's a UNESCO colonizing term. And that's all the Malaysian government seems to be interested in these days, as far as culture is concerned, chasing this silly UNESCO, whatever heritage thing, and then wasting all the resources that come its way. Look at Penang. Penang has become quite an idiot city for all its, its kitsch, its paradise itself. It wants to be the next Singapore, I think. And there is no real thinking about what the preservation of buildings there is, or so it's all tourist driven. And Malacca is even worse. If you go to Yonkers Street, it's just become a complete third-rate kitsch bazaar. There is no intellectual work there at all. Who has done any work recently in Malacca on Harmony Square? You know what Harmony Square is, right? It's one of the earliest mixed places of faith. Chinese temple, Hindu temple, the great mosque on that side, Harmony Square. And today, Malaysians go to Indonesia and look at a church next to a mosque and say, how wonderful, when it's right in front of their eyes and they don't see anything. So there's very little resources put into all these kinds of things, because as again, culture is just a way to make money. Yet in this country, culture is the most abused term there is. Everybody talks about culture all the time without actually understanding what it is. Yes, so I think we need to define and redefine terms like heritage, terms like preservation. The reason why Pusaka doesn't use the word preservation is there's actually nothing to preserve. For as long as there is still one shadow puppeteer who's telling his stories and being defiant against state strictured rules, I am not preserving anything. There is a life there, and that life is alive, right? And we've adopted that. So I think what we need to do always is, as much as we are engaged in advocacy work, I think the thought processes have to be very, very important. I think Asia as a whole started out with great ideals, with great writing, with great intellectual rigor. You look at the reform movement in Islam in the turn of the century. You look at someone like Rabindranath Tagore. You look at someone like Sun Yat-sen. You look at revolutionary movements. They were all primarily first about thinking our societies through. Today we have just become societies engaged in both. Don't mind where our resources come from. As long as we are able to line our pockets, we don't mind adopting the language of many of these NGO industry and funding agencies. Gender issues, for example. Matrilineal societies were in practice, and a woman's status was in practice in Southeast Asia far earlier than it was ever envisioned in the West. Yet today, the whole gender debate is dominated by a Western vocabulary. Let me take on something a lot more controversial. Sexual fluidity. An issue that has been dealt with in Southeast Asia far longer than it came to be known even in Western society. Yet today that entire debate is debated in the language and the jargon of Western NGO movements. That is not their fault. That is our fault, because we are very willingly colonized these days. So in conclusion, I think CSOs play a very, very crucial role. And they play a very crucial role in Malaysia today because they are not just contributing to nation building. I think they are where the whole evolution of nation building actually rests today. It certainly doesn't rest in government and its agencies. It rests in people with all the intellectual resources and the spiritual resources that will essentially shape future to come for the nation, that will less be centered on centralized authorities and powers and increasingly disseminated among society at large. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Edin, and thank you again to all of our four panelists this morning. Well, I think our scheduling is totally gone out of the window. But nevertheless, I would like to indulge in maybe 2 or 3 questions from the participants. Yes. Okay, maybe one. Sir, anybody like to ask a question? Maybe okay, yes, please.
Hello, Assalamualaikum. I'm Sharul from IKRAM. Thank you very much for the respectable speakers for enlightening us on many aspects and facets regarding work on civil society. These are very important and uh, pertinent for the discussion today. I wish to raise a question, maybe for your insights too, on because it was said just now, like Dr. Sharifah mentioned on somewhat a demarcation, so to speak, between civil society, which are clustered within the civilized society as well as the uncivilized society. Is there, for example, uh, 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 um, an an insight on um, a maturity index, so to speak, of these various civil society, be it local or international, uh, on how they, for example, on their impact, outcome, on their size, because what was stated was very general. I would say, was it qualitative? Probably if you can enlighten us on the quantitative nature of the current demographies of civil society in Malaysia, that would be very helpful for us to really understand. And maybe from Madam Siti Fadilah can also enlighten us on the international sphere, so to speak, on this civil society. Because to me it is important. One major grassrooted civil society, I don't know whether they are present here today, that I think has done splendid work in connected to grassroots. For example, the Nahdlatul Ulama or the Muhammadiyah in Indonesia, where their members go to the hundreds of millions, and they have established thousands of schools, universities, hospitals, and such. I do not know whether we have civil society of that degree in Malaysia, but if you can give some thoughts on that, it will be good. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment and question, Mr. Shahrul. To be honest, we have not done yet research on the quantitative nature, since it's very hard to get the information from the local NGOs. Some information might be confidential for them, so they don't want to give further information. But what we did is on qualitative research, where we interview the workers or the staff that work inside the local NGOs, and we found out that there are several issues. Like I said, and I mentioned before, workers exploitation, issue on sexual harassment, issue on misuse of funding, and so on. So yeah, it's more on qualitative research that we have done. Yes, that is my comment. So maybe one city want to would explain.
Thank you, Doctor. And thank you also, Mr. Shah, for the questions. I indeed agree with what Doctor said in Malaysia context, because we don't have like charity commissions, but in other big countries, they do have these charity commissions, and every information in regards to the CSOs, in terms of facts, in terms of achievements, in terms of the governance and everything is there. And it's easy for us to access all the information. And for example, and also there's a lot of bodies that controls and oversee these CSOs in order to them being verified as a qualified CSO, in order for them to be recognized as effective, sometimes we refer to whatever bodies that they become a signatory or they become members. For instance, I think at international level, they have this so-called core humanitarian standard for humanitarian NGO, for humanitarian CSO. So whoever become the signatory of this certified by this core humanitarian standard in humanitarian field, they are considered as professional and others in terms of quality of work, in terms of governance, in terms of the standard, and then so on. So there are several, and sometimes it is based on the countries. If you are in the USA, they have different kind of bodies. If you are in British, they're different kind of bodies. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I made Dr. Daniel. I thank you for the responses. I would think based on my personal experiences. I mean regarding CSO, we have our CSO, we have our agencies and institutions under IKRAM. Some of them have gone to flying colors. One, for example, Hidayah Center, started out with us, IKRAM, paying for the emoluments for 5 staff. But now Hidayah Center has grown to more than double of IKRAM in terms of staffing. They are about 95 now, and they have gone into more than 30 countries. So in terms of maturity, for example, for growth of CSO, I am keen to believe that every CSO will need to go through the natural step of growth of say build from starting a toddler and building the in terms of members to building the institution itself to growing up and big. IKRAM, for example, I think we are now at that level, but not all. Some people are still facing monetary issues and such. But no. We are in it together. Yeah. No, everybody grows. Everybody grows, and we may fall back anytime. At one point in time, we also I was also partnered with another CSO that was also villainized in by the government at one point in time, and we were going through these UN documents, and we were quite startled to realize that even some governments they actually dub civil society that receive a certain amount of funding from external party as being foreign agents. So these are some of the things that were very I would say dubious in one sense for human rights activists, so to speak. Right. Yeah, go ahead.
No, just a very quick observation. Very interesting what Adin, not Dr. yet, Dr. Adin Koo said. And this is, maybe it's not felt by some of us, maybe felt by us, that the government's approach generally to CSO or non-state actors is oppositional. When we need you, we can work with you. Other than that, but there's no sincere for me lah. There's no sincere effort on a broad scale. Bring up those CSOs to the next level to be more effective, professional, rather than let it go and some NGOs do it very well. I think 95% of the NGOs are actually struggling because they need the support, they need the help, and if they can raise to the next level, I think the impact on society will be even better in terms of capacity building and so on. So very interesting, because I agree with it. I think Haji Badin Shah has a different view a little bit, but actually from a different angle, looking at the same scenario.
Alright, I think we'll kita tangguhkan dulu this particular session. I think Dr. Ain has some instructions pertaining to the breakout session. So we'll be back here by a certain time. So I leave it to her now.
Something else. Some are worrying about the Jummah prayers. There is a mosque up there, and we will be performing the Jummah up there. And today, exceptionally, we have the honor to perform Jummah with the presence of our rector, Tansri Dato Dr. Zulkifli. And we will end latest by 12:45. Okay, for now, I take pleasure to invite our respected co-organizing chairman, CEO of ACSIN, Tuan Haji IR Muhammad Jamaluddin Shamsuddin, to please come in front to deliver tokens of appreciations to our panelists. First, the first panelist is Tuan Haji Badlisha Shambaharin from Ikram, Malaysia. Second, we have Madam Siti Fadila from Islamic Relief Malaysia. Our third panelist, Dr. Sharifa Nur Shahida Said Anwar from UKM. Last but not least, our wonderful panelist number 4, Mr. Edin Hu from ISIS Malaysia and Pusak. Okay, and one for our wonderful moderator, Associate Professor Dr. Danielle. Everybody is wonderful. Thank you, panelists and moderators. This is the end of the hybrid session for today. We want to thank our online participants for gracing us with their precious time and participation. We hope you enjoyed the experience and insights. Looking forward to meeting you next time. However, for our participants here in the room, there will be group discussions that will be held at 5 rooms in ISTAC. It is important to highlight that the results of these discussions will be summed up as a resolution at the end of this program. The names of respected NGO VIPs will be listed in the papers given to you. So please refer to the paper that was previously handed by our committee members. While for students and other members of the floor, kindly refer to the list outside that is pasted on the board outside of the conference paper. Oh, okay. Group number 1 will be located here in the Ibn Khaldun conference room. Group number 2 will be located at the seminar room number 3 just beside here. Group number 3 will be located at the meeting room number 1, that is located in front of this conference room. And we have group number 4 will be located at the seminar room number 7, and group number 5 at meeting room number 2. Both of these rooms are located at the other side of the building, right after the elevator. Okay, so after referring the names at the list, you can refer to our staff members or Apni find yourself, because the rooms there will be signboards on the doors along the way. So please take note. We will gather here again at around 12:40 before we present the resolution at the end. Thank you very much.